Paradox Rift releases on November 3rd and features new Ancient and Future Paradox Pokemon cards and trainer cards. Today I will look over all of the notable cards and rate them on a scale of 1 to 5 stars in the scope of the competitive standard format. I will give my thoughts on the set as a whole at the end of the video, including new decks to expect, cards of special interest, and overall effects on the metagame. Any cards not featured in today's video have been tossed into the bulk bin, but let me know if I missed any hidden gems. Now let's start things off with the new trainer cards. Ancient Booster Energy Capsule and Future Booster Energy Capsule are tool cards for the new Ancient and Future Pokemon. The main reason we're reviewing the trainer cards first is to have the context of cards like these energy capsules when we evaluate the new Pokemon cards later in the video. The Ancient Capsule reads, the ancient Pokemon this card is attached to gets plus 60 HP and can't be affected by any special conditions. This is more HP compared to recent tool cards like Big Charm and Bravery Charm, and it protects the Pokemon from special conditions. The Future Capsule reads, the future Pokemon this card is attached to has no retreat cost, and its attacks do 20 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. This Future Capsule is like combining Floatstone and Muscle Band into one tool card, which were both highly played cards. The Ancient Capsule is very good, but it is a passive tool only to be used by ancient Pokemon, so I'm giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. The Future Capsule is likely even better since free retreat and increased damage output are both attributes your Pokemon can benefit from on the turn the tool is played, so I will give it 4 out of 5 stars, keeping in mind it is specific to one small group of Pokemon. The best user for Ancient Capsule will likely be Roaring Moon EX due to its already high HP, but Brute Bonnet has an ability which is only activated by Ancient Capsule, so we could see it used there as well. The best Pokemon to put Future Capsule on are probably Iron Hands EX and Iron Valiant EX, which can both benefit from both effects of the capsule. Something to note for these tools and other tools mentioned is that the Arven supporter card has become increasingly popular in the standard format and will only get better with a wide variety of new tool cards in this set. Counter Catcher is a reprint that should have longtime competitors excited for the return of this card that encourages playing from behind and staging comebacks. The effect of gusting an opponent's Pokemon to the active is incredibly strong in the Pokemon TCG, and cards like Boss's Orders, Pokemon Catcher, and Cross Switcher are widely played for this reason. I'm rating Counter Catcher 5 out of 5 stars, and I'm super excited to add this to some of my decks, especially slower evolution archetypes. Cursed Duster is a tool card which makes your opponent discard a random card from their hand if they knock out the Pokemon this card is attached to, with damage from an attack. I think this card is severely underpowered and probably wouldn't even be played if this effect happened every time the Pokemon was damaged by an attack, not only when it's KO'd. Cursed Duster receives 1 out of 5 stars. Defiance Vest is another tool card. If you have more prizes remaining than your opponent, the Pokemon this card is attached to takes 40 less damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. I really like the design of this card, especially because it shows the developers are keeping their promise about comeback mechanics in Scarlet and Violet sets, along with cards like Counter Catcher and Reversal Energy. Even with cards commonly having 300 or more HP, and attacks that can knock anything out in one shot, 40 damage is still a pretty solid amount to prevent. 2.5 out of 5 stars for Defiance Vest. Earthen Vessel allows you to search for 2 basic energy cards, but you must discard a card from your hand to play it. This is technically a nerfed version of Professor's Letter since it has an additional cost of discarding a card from your hand, but plenty of decks want to discard specific cards, which would make this even better than Professor's Letter for some decks. I'm rating this card 5 out of 5, and I expect it to immediately be included into several competitive archetypes. Larry is a coin flip supporter card. If you flip heads, you can search your deck for 2 Pokemon, and if you flip tails, you can search your deck for just 1 basic Pokemon. The effect of searching for 2 Pokemon for the cost of 1 card is incredibly valuable, as we've seen with Battle VIP Pass in standard format. But is it worth the coin flip? I could imagine a card like this being good in evolution decks, especially in a slower format, but likely not in the near future due to the power level of the other supporter cards available in standard format. For these reasons, Larry receives 2 out of 5 stars. I've waited a long time for a card like Luxurious Cape because it is very similar to Expert Belt from the 2009 expansion Platinum Arceus. Luxurious Cape gives a non-rule box Pokemon 100 more HP, but also makes them worth 1 more prize card. I think it's worth noting that if a Pokemon with this tool attached would be KO'd by removing the tool with something like Lost Vacuum, the Pokemon would only give up one prize card. Luxurious Cape will be good for Pokemon being held back by their HP, and remember, this can be attached to basic Stage 1 or Stage 2 Pokemon. An example of a basic Stage 1 and Stage 2, Snorlax from Lost Origins, Satitan from Paldea Evolved, and the new Aegislash are all Pokemon that could potentially use Luxurious Cape effectively. I think this card is very balanced, so while I think it's an awesome and creative card, I'm only rating it 3 out of 5 stars. Mela is similar to Raihan since it can only be used if one of your Pokemon were knocked out last turn. Mela specifically attaches a fire energy from your discard to one of your Pokemon, and then you draw until you have 6 cards in your hand. I foresee this card being underplayed until Raihan is rotated out of the format, but it's a really solid card for decks playing fire energy, which gives it a 3 out of 5 star rating. Our next supporter card, Norman, is bad because you can't count on your opponent consistently having an EX Pokemon in the active, especially in the current standard format. Norman gets 1 out of 5 stars. Parasol Lady is way too specific for me. Like VIP Pass or Squawkabilly EX, it has an effect that's usable on the first turn, but since it's a supporter card, it can only be used to its full effect on your first turn going second. It's not a dead card later on since it shuffles and draws 4 on any turn of the game, but at that point it's worse than Judge or Iono. Parasol Lady receives 1 out of 5 stars. Professor Sada's Vitality is an ancient supporter card that reads, choose up to 2 of your ancient Pokemon and attach a basic energy from your discard pile to each of them. If you attached any energy this way, draw 3 cards. Roaring Moon EX seems like the best Pokemon to use this supporter card with, but the potential can still grow with more ancient Pokemon yet to be revealed for future sets. I'm not sure that this card will immediately be a part of a tier 1 archetype due to the newness and scarcity of ancient Pokemon, but it provides an incredible amount of value in just one supporter card, so I'm rating it 4.5 out of 5 stars, keeping it from the full 5 out of 5 because it can only be used with ancient Pokemon. Professor Turo's Scenario is actually just a reprint of AZ, with a new name and the future emblem. AZ was very good for picking up damaged Pokemon, removing liabilities from the board, or even as a continuous strategy for wall stall decks to use turn after turn to effectively heal Pokemon and stall out the game. Professor Turo's Scenario will be overshadowed by Penny for any deck that primarily plays basic Pokemon, since Penny can pick up a basic Pokemon without discarding the cards like Turo does. Professor Turo's Scenario can generally be used in many kinds of decks, which plays a part in it receiving a 4 out of 5 star rating. Rika is similar to Colress's Experiment, except it only looks at 4 cards and gives you 2 of them compared to Colress looking at 5 and keeping 3. The trade-off for this downgrade is that Rika sends the excess cards to the bottom of your deck, opposed to Colress sending them to the Lost Zone. With my current evaluation of the card, I'd almost always rather have Colress in my deck over Rika so I can choose more cards from a larger selection, even if it means I have to send 2 cards to the Lost Zone. Rika is not only underpowered when compared to Colress, but also compared to other popular supporters like Professor's Research, Iono, and Worker. Rika receives 1.5 out of 5 stars. Roark is another underpowered supporter card. If it drew 3 cards, then it could be compared to the likes of Birdkeeper, Avery, and Worker, but only drawing 2 cards with a less than impressive secondary effect is not very good, so I'm rating it 1 out of 5 stars. Shauntal at best is a boss's orders when you flip heads, and is a switch when you flip tails. A bimodal card that chose between these effects would be incredible, but getting one of them at random is awful, so Shauntal is a 1 out of 5 star card. Snorlax Doll is similar to Lily's Polka Doll and Robo Substitute, except you can play it down only during setup. Otherwise, it is just a dead item card. This stipulation makes the card unplayable in my opinion, so I'm rating it 1 out of 5 stars. Technical Machine Blindside is the worst of the 4 technical machines in Paradox Rift. It gives the attached Pokemon the attack Blindside. For 3 energy, this attack does 100 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon that has any damage counters on it. This is a decent attack, but there are many decks that already have better ways to hit the bench for similar amounts of damage. Maybe in the future this could be better when cards like Rapid Striker, Shifu VMAX, Radiant Greninja, and Sableye are gone, since they are some of the best sniping Pokemon. Manaphy with Wave Veil will also rotate the same time as Radiant Greninja. For now, TM Blindside is 2 out of 5 stars. TM De-Evolution provides an attack that could be good as our format continues to include more evolution Pokemon in competitive decks. For one colorless energy, the attack devolves the highest stage from each of your opponent's evolved Pokemon. This would shine in a deck that spreads damage so that you could devolve multiple damaged Pokemon at once, causing them all to be knocked out if they have enough damage on them already. This card provides a unique attack, but I believe it will be relevant for a small category of decks and not the meta as a whole, so I'm rating it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next is TM Evolution. It provides the attack Evolution. For one colorless energy, choose up to 2 of your benched Pokemon, then search your deck for a Pokemon that evolves from each of them and evolve them. This card creates a really strong play for stage 2 decks on their first turn going second, and could be used to a lesser advantage in their second turn after going first. An important thing to keep in mind about a technical machine like this that is specifically good during the early game is that you can attach this to whatever Pokemon you want, like a tech that's bad in the current matchup or the awkward Pokemon you started in your active position. I've rated TM Evolution 4 out of 5 stars. I believe it has great potential, but is going to be restricted to evolution decks, likely stage 2 decks specifically. The last new technical machine is Turbo Energize. For one colorless energy, Turbo Energize searches your deck for up to 2 basic energies and attaches them to your benched Pokemon however you like. This card has a wider set of uses than all the previous TMs, which is why I'm rating it 4 out of 5 stars. I don't think any of the TMs reach 5-star status, but I foresee them being increasingly viable as time goes on and rotations remove the stronger cards from Sword and Shield. Techno Radar is a future item card, which allows you to discard a card from your hand to search your deck for 2 future Pokemon. This card is only as strong as the available future Pokemon are, and how many of them we need to search out of the deck. Iron Hands EX is certainly a good Pokemon card, but likely would be the only future Pokemon in most lists it's included in. Iron Valiant EX would make good use of Techno Radar, but at the time of this review, the immediate viability of an Iron Valiant EX deck is unknown. Techno Radar is an incredible card that finds 2 Pokemon for the cost of discarding a card, but since it is restricted to only finding future Pokemon, I'm rating it 3.5 out of 5. Tulip is the final trainer card of the set. This supporter allows you to retrieve up to 4 in any combination of Psychic Pokemon and Psychic Energy from your discard pile to your hand. This is better than Clara if all or most of the cards you'd want back anyway are Psychic type, and Clara will rotate soon anyway. Tulip could be very good in a Psychic focused deck, but I'm only rating it 2.5 out of 5 due to this Psychic type limitation. There is only one special energy in Paradox Rift, so I'm going to include that with the trainer cards. Medical Energy provides a colorless energy when attached to a Pokemon, and when you attach it from your hand to a Pokemon, you may heal 30 damage from the attached Pokemon. This effect is helpful but pretty weak on a colorless special energy that needs to be attached directly from the hand, so I'm rating this 2 out of 5 stars since most decks won't find the room for a card like this. If you're enjoying today's video, remember to subscribe for more Pokemon TCG content. If you'd like to support my channel, you can visit my sponsors and affiliates, which are linked down below. For a wide selection of sealed products, pre-orders for new releases, and unique mystery box items, use code CELIO5 at PokeCollect.com. Use code CELIO at PotownStore.com when shopping for Pokemon TCG Live code cards. Use my affiliate links for Dragon Shield sleeves, my favorite card sleeves to use, and Into the AM apparel for comfortable and passionate clothing. If you have Pokemon TCG bulk lying around, start selling it with ease at tcgbulk.com. And don't forget to stop by PokemonCard.io for deck building, community forums, and news articles. You can find free and premium articles and videos for competitive Pokemon TCG at Metafy, and you can directly support me if you become a Metafy member. Information for Pokemon TCG coaching and gameplay reviews can also be found at my Metafy link in the description down below. Moving on to the notable non-rulebox Pokemon of the set, starting with Simisage, Simisear, and Simipour. These Pokemon have the gimmicky ability Monkey Trio. If you have Simisage, Simisear, and Simipour in play, ignore all colorless energy costs and attacks this Pokemon uses. Simisage and Simipour both have attacks usable with reversal energy, but Simisear isn't very useful when the ability is inactive. It's too much to ask to have all 3 stage 1 monkeys on the board and keep it that way, even if you're using Zoroark from Evolving Skies to help establish more stage 1 Pokemon. Simisage and Simipour each get 1.5 out of 5 stars for their attacks, but Simisear gets 1 out of 5 stars because its attack cost is just too steep without the ability. Simipour could actually be pretty good in a future format without Manaphy. Next is Toedscruel, which I'm reviewing for its Slime Mold Colony ability. This ability prevents your opponent from returning any cards in their discard pile to their hand with the effects of abilities or trainer cards. A quick list of some popular cards this would stop includes Superior Energy Retrieval, which is a staple for Chi and Excalibur, Energy Retrieval, which is played in Inteleon Urshifu, and Clara, which is often played in Lost Zone box decks. This is a really interesting card with a niche effect, but it could completely shut down a deck reliant on those effects like Chi and Excalibur is. Toedscruel receives 1.5 out of 5 stars for its useful but incredibly niche ability. Volcanion has the dual turbo attack, which does 20 damage and accelerates a fire energy from your discard onto 2 of your benched Pokemon. This is almost a reprint of Volcanion from Simisage, except the second attack costs 1 more energy, so it's actually a bit weaker. I could see this being used with the new Skeledir GX, assuming Skeledir GX ever becomes meta relevant. Volcanion is good enough for 2 out of 5 stars. There are several other Pokemon in the set like Chi and Pal and Wo-Chien with 1 energy attacks that accelerate 2 energies, but the combination of Volcanion's 20 damage and Skeledir GX to boost that damage by 60 makes Volcanion more noteworthy than the others in my opinion. Iron Moth is a really underwhelming card, but I could see it being used for its Thermal Reactor ability to take energies off of a damaged Pokemon, so you can use Cheryl or Professor Turo scenario to heal the damaged Pokemon without losing the energies. Other than that, I think this card is really weak, and I'm giving it 1.5 out of 5 stars solely due to the ability. Next is Vanilluxe, a Stage 2 Water-type Pokemon with 150 HP. I'm reviewing this card for its Frigid Room ability, which says your opponent's Pokemon that have 40 HP or less remaining cannot attack. This ability has potential in a vacuum, but being on a pretty weak Stage 2 Pokemon makes me less than optimistic that this could actually see competitive play. Vanilluxe receives 1.5 out of 5 stars. Veluza has the Hydro Pump attack, which starts at 120 damage if you have 3 water energy attached for the energy cost, and scales 20 more damage with each water energy attached. It's not very impressive that it would take 11 water energies for Veluza to deal 280 damage, but its ability Fillet Memento saves some of the energy attached to it when it's knocked out. The redeeming factor of the ability and the decent scaling of the attack, combined with the fact we have Excalibur as an easy way to flood water energy onto the board, makes this card 2 out of 5 stars in my eyes. Iron Bundle has the ability Hyper Blower, which makes your opponent switch their active Pokemon out for a benched Pokemon of their choosing, and you discard Iron Bundle from play. This effect is useful for removing effects of attacks from the opponent's active Pokemon, like Hisuian Goodra V-Star's Rolling Irons effects, or Alolan Vulpix V-Star's Snow Mirage's effects, or for forcing a weaker Pokemon into the active. It has a semi-useful attack, Refrigerated Steam, which does 80 damage, and the effect reads, if the defending Pokemon is an evolution Pokemon, it can't attack during your opponent's next turn. This is an effect that isn't too relevant since most decks have multiple ways to switch their Pokemon or can simply retreat, but I could see this attack being an issue for something like Charizard EX. Iron Bundle will likely be used for just its ability, and I'm rating it 2.5 out of 5 stars. Elekid is a neat little card. It only has 30 HP, but it has the free attack Crackling Shot, which does 30 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. With cards like Sableye, Medicham V, and Radiant Alakazam around, it's pretty scary to play Pokemon with such low HP, but those cards won't be around forever, so maybe Elekid could be included in some decks for this free attack one day. For now, I'm pretty sure it's just a 1 out of 5 star card. Plusle and Minun pair up for Minun's Buddy Pulse ability, which reads, if you have Plusle in play, whenever your opponent attaches an energy card from their hand to one of their Pokemon, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. In addition to this, Plusle actually has a usable attack, which does 10 damage plus 10 more damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. I don't expect these cards to see any immediate play competitively due to the harsh environment for low HP Pokemon, so they will be receiving 1.5 out of 5 stars since this review focuses on the scope of the current standard format. Next we have Xatu with the Clairvoyant Sense ability. Once during your turn, you may attach a basic psychic energy from your hand to one of your benched Pokemon. If you attached an energy, draw 2 cards. This is similar to Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX's ability, which was incredible in its heyday, but this Xatu is not a rulebox Pokemon, which means it's not a liability on the bench, and it is not affected by Path to the Peak. This Xatu will surely see play, both for the power level of its own ability and due to the surplus of great Psychic-type Pokemon available in Standard. Xatu receives 4 out of 5 stars because it accelerates energies and draws cards with the same ability, which is pretty incredible. Latios is a pretty decent single prize attacker. When paired with a card that accelerates psychic energy like Gardevoir EX or Xatu, its Luster Purge attack will be pretty easy to use and does 180 damage, which is the highest damage output we currently have on a single prize basic psychic Pokemon for just 3 energy. It only has 110 HP, which is quite low and means it's in range of Cramorant's Spit Innocently. This card is nothing crazy, but will receive a modest 2 out of 5 stars. We got another Tinkaton in this set. This time it has Crushing Blow, which does 30 damage and discards an energy on the defending Pokemon, and Alloy Hammer, which can do 180 for 1 Luminous energy, since Luminous would provide Metal and Psychic at the same time. It has really low HP for a Stage 2 Pokemon, which is going to keep my rating for it any higher than 1.5 out of 5 stars. Next is Screamtail, which looks like it was made to work with Gardevoir EX. Its Roaring Scream attack does 20 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each damage counter on Screamtail. Using Gardevoir EX's Psychic Embrace, you can put up to 8 damage counters on Screamtail and have it snipe for 160 damage. With Ancient Booster Capsule giving Screamtail extra HP, this can go up to 280 damage, and with Luxurious Cape it can go up to 320 damage. Screamtail receives 2.5 out of 5 stars, since I'm not actually sure it will end up being optimal in Gardevoir EX decks, at least not immediately. Minior has an ability and attack that make it useful for specific scenarios. Its Flying Meteor ability switches it into the active when you attach to it, meaning you won't have to retreat your active Pokemon, but this also can be used to switch out your active Pokemon from something like block Snorlax's ability or being affected by paralysis. The Gravitational attack does 20 damage times the retreat cost of the defending Pokemon, which means this is great for knocking out Snorlax from Lost Origins or the block Snorlax. The idea of playing this in control decks has been tossed around already, since Cry of Destruction Yveltal cannot remove energies from Snorlax from Lost Origin, so you would use this Minior to knock them out instead. Minior receives 2 out of 5 stars because it has a couple applicable uses. Garganacl has the ability Energizing Rock Salt, which attaches a fighting energy from your discard to one of your Pokemon and heals the Pokemon for 30. This probably won't see play immediately, but it's a card to keep an eye on for the future, especially with a new Garganacl EX on the horizon. I'm rating it 1.5 out of 5 stars because it's a Stage 2 Pokemon, and it should be expected that Stage 2 Pokemon will provide a much stronger effect than just 1 extra energy a turn plus a little bit of healing. Next is Klawf with the Unhinged Scissors attack. For 2 colorless energy, Unhinged Scissors does 30 damage plus 160 more if Klawf is affected by a special condition. It's pretty easy to affect your own Pokemon with a special condition, with cards like Spicy Seasoned Curry and the new Brute Bonnet available. With Miraidon EX being a pretty popular deck and the new Iron Hands EX garnering a ton of hype, Fighting type weakness is a pretty good one to hit for. Klawf receives 2 out of 5 stars. Flamigo is another fighting type Pokemon that could be useful due to Iron Hands EX being an anticipated meta threat, since Flamigo does 20 damage plus 20 more damage for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. Combat Beak would do 240 damage to a fighting weak Pokemon if your opponent has a full bench. This earns Flamigo 1.5 out of 5 stars. Slither Wing could find itself in control decks for both its Stomp Off attack, which mills 1 card from the opponent's deck, and the Burning Turbulence attack, which does 120 damage and burns the defending Pokemon, dealing 90 damage to Slither Wing as well. The idea of Burning Turbulence being a usable attack is because it one-shots Iron Hands EX, as well as Snorlax from Lost Origins. While it can be used for these reasons, it's one of the weaker Paradox Pokemon in the set and receives 1.5 out of 5 stars. This Ting Lu does 220 damage, which is kind of nuts on a single prizer with 140 HP. Unfortunately, the attack says if Ting Lu has 4 or more damage counters on it, this attack does nothing. Still, it does a huge amount of damage and can also attach energies with that first attack. The main issue for a card like this is I don't know what deck it would go in, maybe Garchomp EX. So with that lack of direction for the card, it's going to be just a 2 out of 5 star card. Morpeko's ability gives it free retreat, and it's level ball searchable, so this could be included in a deck just for the free retreat. It also has an attack energy wheel, which does 70 damage for 2 energy, and then moves 2 dark energy from Morpeko to one of your benched Pokemon. This is good for poking damage and then preserving the energy on a bulkier benched Pokemon. Morpeko receives 1.5 out of 5 stars. Brute Bonnet has the ability Toxic Powder, which requires you to have the Ancient Booster Energy Capsule attached, and it poisons both active Pokemon. If your active Ancient Pokemon also has an Ancient Booster Energy Capsule attached, it can't be poisoned, and you'll only poison your opponent. Brute Bonnet can also attack in a pinch, but its attack is not very good. Brute Bonnet receives 2.5 out of 5 stars because I think there is some potential in poisoning your opponent's active Pokemon consistently. Next we have Jirachi, which should be competitively viable due to its Stellar Veil ability that prevents damage counters from being placed on your benched Pokemon by your opponent's basic Pokemon. This incredibly specific ability is meant to counter Sablei's Lost Mine attack, which will be a pretty big deal if Lost Zone decks continue to be a large chunk of the meta at large events. Stellar Veil also protects your benched Pokemon from attacks like Medicham V's Yoga Loop. Jirachi also has an attack that searches your deck for 2 basic energies, so it's not entirely useless if you start it in the active against a non-Lost Zone deck. Although Jirachi's use is quite specific, Sablei's Lost Mine attack is extremely relevant, and many decks have been written off solely because of Lost Mine, so I'm rating Jirachi 4 out of 5 stars, and maybe this will even bring new viability to older cards. Aegislash is a Stage 2 Metal Pokemon with 150 HP and the ability Mysterious Shield, which prevents all damage done to this Pokemon by your opponent's V and EX Pokemon. We already have Mimikyu with the same ability, but with much less HP. Aegislash is tough enough that your opponent's non-EX and non-V Pokemon might not be able to take it down in just one hit. Aegislash has one attack, Hard Bashing, which does 120 damage. It goes through all effects. This card is reminiscent of Decidueye from Darkness Ablaze, which is why I see potential in it, since Decidueye was able to compete in the standard format back then. Aegislash receives 3 out of 5 stars. Tatsugiri is a card I've been excited to cover. Its survival strategy attack searches your deck for any 2 cards for 2 colorless energy, which is an effect we've seen utilized for control style decks in the past. What is special about Tatsugiri's attack is that it gives you the option to switch Tatsugiri with one of your benched Pokemon. So you could attach a DTE, use survival strategy to find any 2 cards, and then switch Tatsugiri into a Pokemon like Klefki, which hurts the opponent, or a Pokemon like Mimikyu, which can't be hit by V and EX Pokemon. I fully expect a control deck, or even some other style of deck that runs DTE and good Pokemon to switch into, to make use out of Tatsugiri, so I'm rating it 3 out of 5 stars. The last card to review before we move on to the EX Pokemon is Iron Jugulus. Iron Jugulus's first attack, Homing Headbutt, costs 3 colorless energy, and does 50 damage to 3 of your opponent's Pokemon with damage counters on them. This attack is absolutely ridiculous in my opinion, and the only reason people aren't more hyped for it is because Manaphy is in the format. Iron Jugulus also has Baryon Beam, which does 150 and costs 3 colorless energy as long as you have Future Booster Energy Capsule attached to it, in which case it will also be doing 170 damage. I could see this being used aside Iron Valiant EX, Lost Zone decks, or even something like Meowscarada EX. I think the energy cost and the existence of Manaphy balances this card out to about 3.5–5 stars, but who knows what type of support these future Pokemon will get in, well, the future. Moving on to EX Pokemon, the first of the review is Froslass EX. Froslass EX is terastallized to Grass type and is weak to Fire, but uses Water energy for its attacks. Froslass EX has pretty low HP and an underwhelming attack, but comes with an ability that can reduce the amount of prize cards your opponent takes when they KO this Pokemon. Everything about this card is underwhelming, messy, and gimmicky at best, so Froslass EX receives 1 out of 5 stars. Armarouge EX has 260 HP, an attack that scales 40 more damage for each fire energy attached with a base of 40 damage, and the ability Crimson Armor, which says if this Pokemon has full HP, it takes 80 less damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. This ability would effectively mean the opponent has to do 340 damage to KO Armarouge EX, which is great, but the ability can be nullified by placing damage on Armarouge EX in some other way before attacking, or simply by playing Path to the Peak. You can power up Armarouge EX with Magma Basin and move energy around with the Scarlet and Violet base set Armarouge, as well as increase its damage output with the new Skeledirge EX. This all sounds like a lot to accomplish, but I can see some of the strategies the designers may have had in mind when making this card. I think it has slight potential and isn't totally awful, but the card's capabilities come with too many stipulations in my opinion, so I'm rating it 2 out of 5 stars. Garchomp EX appears in Paradox Rift as a Terra Water type Pokemon with weakness to Lightning and uses Fighting and Colorless energy costs to attack. It has 320 HP, which is great, but that bulkiness comes with the caveat of Lightning weakness, which means Pokemon like Iron Hands EX, Raikou V, and Miraidon EX will have an easy time taking Garchomp EX down. Also notable about Garchomp EX is that it has free retreat, which should never be undervalued. The first attack, Hydrolander, does 160 damage for 1 fighting energy, and accelerates 3 basic fighting energies from the discard to your benched Pokemon in any way you like. This is a fantastic attack that gets an incredible amount of value for just 1 energy. Some of the candidates to attach these fighting energies to include Koraidon EX, Ting Lu EX, and Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX. Garchomp EX's second attack costs 2 colorless energies, requires you to discard 2 energy attached to Garchomp, and it does 120 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. It's a nice secondary attack to have, but the highlight is definitely Hydrolander. Garchomp EX has the struggle of being a Stage 2 Pokemon, but we've seen Gardevoir EX, Charizard EX, and Pidgeot EX all make it work recently. Garchomp EX is Water type, so it has Irida at its disposal as well, although that might not work with the rest of the deck if you're including a lot of fighting Pokemon. I know Garchomp EX hasn't gotten much attention with flashier cards in the set, like Iron Hands EX and Roaring Moon EX taking the spotlight, but I think Garchomp EX is an amazing card, and I'm giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next is another terastallized Water-type Stage 2 Pokemon, Serena EX. Serena EX uses Grass Energy, but its attacks only cost 1 and 2 energy respectively, so you won't need any type-specific energy acceleration to get this thing going. The first attack, Icicle Soul, instantly drops one of your opponent's Pokemon to 30 HP remaining. This can be paired with a Poison activator like Brute Bonnet and Radiant Sneasler to essentially one-shot anything in the format, since the Poison will tick down the last 30 damage between turns. This sounds gimmicky, but the attack alone is pretty good against anything with high HP, even if you're not doing the Poison combo or something like it. Serena EX's second attack, Trop Kick, does 180 damage, heals 30 damage, and Serena recovers from all special conditions. 180 damage is relevant because it will 2-shot every 2 prized Pokemon and 1-shot most single prized Pokemon. The healing is also relevant against Lost Zone box decks and anything else that chips away with small damage over time. One more obvious combo for Icicle Soul is to pair it with the new Vanilluxe, leaving your opponent's Pokemon unable to attack, but that would require evolving 2 different Stage 2 Pokemon, neither of which have useful pre-evolutions or abilities to help draw or search cards themselves. I think Icicle Soul is the most notable part about this card, and although its greatest potential is with combos that may sound inconsistent, I see the potential, and I'm giving it 2.5 out of 5 stars. Golisopod EX is a pretty uneventful Pokemon card. Its second attack, Swing and Skedaddle, has an incredible attack name, but that's the last thing I'll cite as incredible about this card. The attack does 170 damage and gives you the option to discard an energy card attached to Golisopod EX to switch it with one of your benched Pokemon. Hit and run strategies have been competitive in the past, but I don't like that you have to discard energy every time you switch it to the bench with this attack. In this case, you'll have to reattach to Golisopod EX every turn and never be able to begin manually attaching energy elsewhere. The hit and run effect will bring this card up to a measly 1.5 out of 5 stars in my book. Next is Mewtwo EX, which is terastallized as a lightning-type Pokemon, likely an homage to the Delta Species Mewtwo card from Hold On Phantoms. Mewtwo EX has pretty high HP for a basic Pokemon and 2 good attacks. Transfer Charge attaches 2 Psychic Energies from your discard pile to any of your Pokemon, and Photon Kinesis does 10 plus 30 more damage for each Psychic Energy attached to all of your Pokemon. This seems like it would be meant to pair with something like the new Xatu, and maybe even Iron Valiant EX as well, and due to the Terastallized typing, such a deck could have Lightning type and Psychic type attackers to cover more weaknesses. I don't love leaving a 2-prizer in the active for an attack like Transfer Charge, but Mewtwo EX does have high HP and could go even higher with Bravery Charm. Mewtwo EX receives 3 out of 5 stars. Tapu Koko EX has 210 HP and 1 retreat cost. Both could be better, but could also be worse. Its most useful attack out of the two is Revenge Shock, which does 120 damage and paralyzes the defending Pokemon if any of your Pokemon were knocked out by damage from an attack last turn. I see this as a strong tech for matchups like Charizard EX or Gardevoir EX, where they have Pokemon with very high HP and don't play a lot of switching cards. Paralyzing is a very strong effect, and I'm positive we'll see this included in some Miraidon EX decks, so I'm rating it 3 out of 5 stars. Finally, the card that has sparked an insane amount of discussion, Iron Hands EX. Iron Hands EX is a bulky basic EX Pokemon with 230 HP and 4 retreat cost. It's also a future Pokemon, so keep that in mind for the current future support and any other future cards in the future. Its first attack, Arm Press, is relevant since it does 160 damage for 3 energy, so that will one-shot anything that is weak to lightning. The second attack, Amp You Very Much, costs 1 lightning and 3 colorless energy, does 120 damage, and takes 1 more prize card when it knocks out an opponent's Pokemon. This extra prize card effect is what has people going crazy about Iron Hands, and for good reason. Arceus Dialga-Palkia tag team was just a few years ago, and the competitive community has still not recovered from it. I don't think Iron Hands EX is anything like the second coming of ADP that the community has made it out to be, since this attack only does 120 damage and costs 4 energy to use. Iron Hands EX should be very good against single prize focused decks like Lost Zone Box and potentially Gardevoir EX, as well as against Pokemon that are weak to lightning. As far as I see it, Iron Hands EX will not be creating any new deck archetypes on its own. Players are expecting it to be present in several existing decks like Miraidon EX and Chi and Pal EX, and to a lesser extent it could be included in Lost Zone decks as well. Overall, I evaluate Iron Hands EX as a very good card that could keep oppressively powerful single prizers like Sableye and Gardevoir in check. Funny that I'm saying that, when a couple years ago the community was begging for good single prizers. Be careful what you wish for, I suppose. Iron Hands EX receives 4 out of 5 stars. I don't think it's broken or even destined for instant tier 1 success, at least not on its own, and not without a metagame that calls for it. Next is Cofagrigus EX. This stage 1 Psychic type EX Pokemon has the attack Hollow Hands, which is reminiscent of Dragapult VMAX. But remember that Dragapult VMAX had way more HP and access to Horror Energy. Hollow Hands does 110 damage and 5 damage counters to the bench in any way you like, which should be really good against single prize decks, but it could also be good against evolution decks when paired with the new TMD evolution later in the game. Cofagrigus EX's main shortcomings are its weakness to dark and very low damage output, but I still see potential here. Its ability Gold Coffin sort of makes up for its less than ideal HP and weakness, but note that it only works when Cofagrigus is KO'd by damage and not by effects. Cofagrigus EX receives 2.5 out of 5 stars. Iron Valiant EX is one of the coolest cards out of this set in my opinion. Its Tachyon Bits ability is revolutionary in terms of ability-based damage spread, rivaling the likes of Inteleon VMAX and Quick Shooting Inteleon. I believe that decks focused on exploiting this ability with high counts of switching cards, Jet Energy, and even Penny will be strong. The interesting part will be the attackers and supporting Pokemon that players choose to include. Xatu, Gardevoir EX, and Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX are all options for accelerating energy to Iron Valiant EX, but Iron Valiant EX doesn't need to be your main attacker for the deck. I look at this card and see countless possibilities for deck building, but I understand that its viability could be limited in the Paradox Rift standard format due to bulky V, V-Star, and VMAX Pokemon left over from the Sword and Shield sets. Even with these stipulations in place, I have to rate this card 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's just way too cool and has so much potential. I'll be shocked if this card doesn't inspire a high tier deck in the next few months. The lack of a streamlined best way to build an Iron Valiant deck, and its expected issues into decks with high HP and ways to heal their Pokemon, kept me from giving this the full 5 out of 5 stars. Hoopa EX is terastallized to Fighting type, and it's an unfortunate design decision for this card. Hoopa uses Dark Energy to attack, but cannot benefit from Dark Patch since it's a Fighting type Pokemon. Fighting type could be a good weakness to capitalize on, with Iron Hands EX getting a lot of hype, and Miraidon EX already being a good archetype, but I'm not sure that a Fighting type Pokemon which needs all Dark Energy to attack would be the way to go for that. An interesting card, but the awkward typing, energy costs, and weakness culminate into a 2.5 out of 5 star rating for Hoopa EX. Toxtricity EX suffers from a similar issue to Hoopa EX. It is a Fighting type Terastal Pokemon, but needs Lightning Energy to attack, but can't benefit from Electric Generator due to its Terastal typing. Although its basic stage Toxel is Lightning type, so you could accelerate the energies there with Electric Generator prior to evolving into Toxtricity EX. The damage output of Gaiapunk is pretty good, but it requires you to discard 3 lightning energies you have in play, which is a pretty hefty additional cost. I'm rating Toxtricity EX 2 out of 5 stars. I really like Sandy Shocks EX due to the design of its magnetic absorption ability. The ability allows you to attach a fighting energy from your discard pile to Sandy Shocks EX if your opponent has 4 or fewer prize cards remaining. That energy can then be used for its ground spike attack, which does 200 damage for 2 fighting and a colorless. Also notable is its grass weakness, which isn't too bad since grass is not a popular type in competitive play at the moment. Its ancient emblem is also quite important, since it can benefit from Ancient Booster Energy Capsule and Professor Sada's Vitality. This card has built-in energy acceleration and good support from the set, but at the end of the day it doesn't do anything fantastic on top of that. With that all in mind, I'm rating Sandy Shocks EX 2.5 out of 5 stars. Next is Roaring Moon EX. This 230 HP basic ancient Pokemon has 2 incredible attacks. Frenzied Gouging instantly KOs the defending Pokemon and deals 200 damage to itself, and Calamity Storm does 100 damage or 220 damage if you discard the Stadium card in play. That 220 damage can be ticked up to 230 by poison damage if you use Brute Bonnet in the deck as well. In addition to 2 efficient and aggressive attacks, Roaring Moon EX's already high HP can go all the way up to 290 HP with Ancient Booster Energy Capsule. This card is a fantastic aggressive basic Pokemon card and has tons of support from cards like Dark Patch, Professor Sada's Vitality, and Ancient Booster Energy Capsule. I have been very impressed by the Roaring Moon EX archetype in my early testing, so I'm giving it an ambitious 5 out of 5 stars. Aegislash EX is a decent EX Pokemon with efficient attacks and very high HP. We've seen that Stage 2 Pokemon are only playable in the format if the card itself or its previous evolutions have some sort of energy acceleration, built-in draw power, or card search ability. However, the other Aegislash in this set has some potential as well, so this Aegislash EX could benefit from that. For now, just 2 out of 5 stars for Aegislash EX, since we have seen evidence that Stage 2 Pokemon need to be borderline broken to even be playable in the current standard format. Skeledirge EX is terastallized as a metal type, which is fine since fire type weakness isn't the worst to have, and we already have a fire type Skeledirge EX which could be played alongside this. The ability Incendiary Song is really strong and boosts its own attack up to 220 with just 1 Incendiary Song being used, which is pretty good. As previously mentioned, I'm skeptical of Stage 2 Pokemon that don't have any built-in support that keeps the deck going or helps it get set up, so I'll be tapering my expectations for this card with 2.5 out of 5 stars. Goldengo EX might look funny, but it's actually quite good. The ability Coin Bonus draws 1 to 2 cards, and you can set up multiple Goldengos to use multiple coin bonuses each turn. The attack, Make It Rain, scales infinitely, and we have plenty of ways to recur basic energy cards, such as Energy Retrieval, Superior Energy Retrieval, and the new Tulip supporter card if you choose to splash Psychic Energies into the deck. Goldengo EX is a really efficient Stage 1 attacker with its own built-in draw ability, which leads me to rate this card 4 out of 5 stars. Altaria EX is meant to be used primarily for its ability, it seems, since its attack has an awkward energy requirement and does an underwhelming amount of damage with a niche effect. Healing 20 damage from each of your Pokemon is pretty good, especially if you can evolve multiple Altaria EXs and activate multiple instances of the ability. but for now I'd rather use Radiant Serena for this effect if needed, so I'm rating Altaria EX 1.5 out of 5 stars. Mousehold EX is a pretty interesting card. Its ability Solidarity punishes your opponent for attacking it even if it's knocked out. Unfortunately, the ability can be turned off with Path to the Peak, and Mousehold EX is just an awful card without the ability. Looks like a fun card to mess around with, and I'm sure we'll see a Little Dark Fury video using it sooner than later, but I can't with good faith rate this anything other than 1 out of 5 stars in a competitive sense. The final card of the set review, Bombardier EX. Quickly, I want to thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video, and I'd love to hear from you all about what cards you're the most excited to build decks with and play out of this set. Bombardier EX is one of those cards that you want to be good and playable, but often is more awkward to include in your deck and make use of than it's really worth. Fast Carry is an incredible attack that allows you to attack on the first turn and use what is essentially a super call for family, searching for and benching 3 basic Pokemon. It looks like 2 easy prizes for aggressive decks, and an awkward card to draw into anytime past the first turn of the game, but the utility it provides is really good when you can make it work. I think if it had free retreat, I'd bump it up to a 3-star card, but alas, I'm going to give it just 2.5 out of 5 stars. Paradox Rift is poised to be one of the best modern Pokemon TCG sets. It's introducing new archetypes of Pokemon with ancient and future cards, as well as plenty of cards outside of these new archetypes which appear to be very good. According to my evaluation, this set should have the highest concentration of playable cards that we've seen in quite some time. Imagine if Sun and Moon Ultra Prism, Shining Legends, and Forbidden Light were all combined into one set. That's essentially how I'm viewing Paradox Rift. I expect many new deck archetypes to emerge, but that's not to say that the pre-existing decks will cease to exist. Roaring Moon EX, Iron Valiant EX, Golden Go EX, Garchomp EX, and Mewtwo EX should all inspire new deck archetypes, while cards like Iron Hands EX, Earthen Vessel, and Jirachi will enhance pre-existing decks. I expect Iron Hands EX and Jirachi to negatively affect Lost Zone Box's place in the metagame, but I would be very surprised if Lost Zone Box fell out of existence. That rarely ever happens to established Tier 1 archetypes in the Pokemon TCG. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and make sure to subscribe for more Pokemon TCG content. If you'd like to, you can find ways to further support my content in the description down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.